The Harvey hurricane was definitely a major event with a lot of immediate impact. The energy infrastructure of U.S. is heavily located in Texas, in the Gulf region. So as a result of that, almost 25% of oil refining capacity was affected. It was closed down. So that had an immediate impact in the industry. Infrastructure damages after a major hurricane are always there. The ports is probably the most significant. Two of the ports that are out of the 6 largest in the U.S., the Houston and the Corpus Christi, were closed for more than a week. Then, of course, highways and major regional railways were affected, and delays as a result of that infrastructure damage. And finally, there are 1,300 petrochemical plants in that area. Not all of them got directly affected, but probably half of them had a certain effect. Some of them were major, where there was explosions at the plant because of the volatility of the chemicals they had to carry, and they had to cool, as it was the plant in Crosby, Texas. The others got affected to some degree, either hard to access because of failure of infrastructure around them, or some flooding, and some repair is going to take a while. These plants now are producing ethylene, polyethylene, polypropylene, and PVC, which are major inputs to a lot of products, going all the way from plastics and antifreeze and house paint and rubber that goes into tires. So a lot of companies are going to be affected in a certain way through shortages. I would say those are the 3 most important immediate impacts that I can see. That is probably the most threatening effect of any major disaster like the one with Hurricane Harvey. That there are going to be ripple effects, and is a little difficult to immediately assess them. My projections will be at the first level, the oil refining capacity is going to affect prices, gas prices, and we have already seen some increase in gas prices. And of course, when the oil refining demand goes down, then obviously crude oil prices are going to be affected in the other way. They will also go down. But these fuel and gas price effects are things that things will disappear rather fast, less than a month, that type of an effect. The effect that some people are seeing is that it's going to affect the dredging capacity. There will be shortages in dredging capacity, an additional 10% in what is already a tight industry. Mostly rebalancing of the capacity, shifting a lot more to the southeast, as express shipments and recovery efforts will also result in higher prices and will be more attractive for truckers. That can be something that we can feel, especially as we see the holiday season coming down in a few months. But it's very hard to assess exactly the level of impact. Ports, together with dredging capacity, can definitely affect major retailers. The one that I'm the most afraid that not only Texas but the whole world might feel is the shortages on ethylene, polyethylene, and the chemical capacity that will take a while before it gets fully operable at the capacity levels of before. 60% of the ethylene capacity is in that area that got affected by Hurricane Harvey. The US capacity is around 20% of the global capacity, so probably you can say that something like 10 to 15% of global capacity has gone down for a period of time. Now, that period of time is hard to assess. Might be a few days, might be a few weeks. But there are shortages that are going to appear within multi-tier supply chains at different levels. And that will affect, suddenly your supplier and yourself gets affected because you don't have access to some of these chemicals or plastics. And as soon as that starts happening, then we start seeing these usual bullwhip effects that can easily go back and far away from Texas. That where would be my bet that the most significant ripple effect is going to happen. It was a little surprising to me that stock prices more or less stayed at the same level and actually picked up a little. So there's certain optimism that some of the financial losses are not going to propagate to the rest of the economy. My explanation is there's not a lot of flooding insurance effects. Flooding is not provided by major insurance, only the government provides flooding insurance, and 85% of the people affected don't have any insurance. So therefore financial losses will not propagate, will not bring down any companies. At the same time, major players, the major public companies might have some failures in servicing or some delays, but they are covered under force majeure clauses in their supply chain contracts, so somewhat the industry doesn't anticipate that there will be major financial penalties. That is the one side. The other side, of course, the markets are always optimistic. Recovery in a region means new demand. So if you have 1 million cars that go destroyed, it could be the car industry the next month might not do that great, but within 6 months might do great. Because new demand comes their way, and GM and Ford might have an opportunity. So therefore, well-managed companies that know how to risk manage and leverage opportunities might be an opportunity for them, and it could be that something that the market is anticipating. As a supply chain guy, my reading is that they think that our supply chains are reasonably resilient. We have learned from lessons of the past, and we know how to handle these kind of events. Traditionally, you need some redundancy in the system. There are a little more inventories on the gas side, gasoline side, so that will allow us to better weather the increase in fuel prices. So that's one side. The government looks ready to help if it's needed with strategic reserves and releasing some of that in the economy. So again, that's good news. And flexibility. Managers and companies have learned how to use real-time information and data to make alternative choices. Reroute shipments out of Houston to another port, try to find alternative suppliers, substitute materials. So there's a certain bet that our supply chains are resilient as a result of lessons of the past. And at the same time, the flexibility that big data and real-time information avails to smart managers.